Hello and welcome to PRO Talks, a podcast by the PR Office. I'm Olivia Whaley and today I am really pleased to share that I'm joined by Jason Groves. In today's episode we talk a lot about, we cover all sorts of topics actually. We talk about diversity, we talk about Jason's experiences in the insurance sector, as well as the comms sector. We talk about the history of the Common Council, and of course we discuss how Jason has helped to grow one of the world's largest diversity and inclusion events. Jason is International Director of External Affairs and Media Relations at Marsh McLennan, the Global Director of External Affairs and Media Relations at Marsh & Guy Carpenter, an elected member of the City of London's Court of Common Council, and the Junior Warden at the Company of Communicators. As if this wasn't enough, Jason also chairs the Dive Festival, which we're going to hear a lot more about shortly. Thank you for joining us, Jason.
Thank you very much, Olivia. It's great to be here.
Great. So where should we begin? Do you want to just tell us the difference between Marsh McLennan and Marsh & Guy Carpenter? Because to an outsider, then the job roles might not sound too dissimilar, but obviously they are.
Marsh McLennan is a global financial professional services firm in the areas of risk, strategy and people. And it goes to market through four businesses: Marsh, the insurance broker, Guy Carpenter, the reinsurance broker, Mercer, which is a health, wealth and benefits business and growing asset manager, and Oliver Wyman, which is one of the world's leading management consultancies. And so my responsibilities, relatively new at the Marsh McLennan level, encompass everywhere outside the US and Canada. And for Marsh and Guy Carpenter, I have more involvement. My global role means I work very closely with their global executive committees.
Okay, so alongside that, you've got your work with the Common Council and the Company of Communicators. And to be honest, when I read that, it sounded almost a little bit medieval, and I think the whole concept of livery companies is a bit Harry Potter-esque. I know it's not actually like that though. So do you want to tell us what it is like?
Well, the City of London is the world's oldest continual democracy. We've been going for just under 1,000 years. Common Council, I'm a Common Councillor, and that was a title that was settled in 1376, and we haven't got round to changing it to bring it in line with sort of modern terminology. The City of London Corporation is one of only a handful of sections of the Magna Carta, which is still in force. So when King John signed that in 1215, one of the clauses was that the City of London shall retain all of its ancient liberties and privileges, and that is still the law of the land today. What that means is that we get to choose the way that we elect our representatives, and specifically the Lord Mayor. In that the Lord Mayor is effectively the UK's ambassador for financial and professional services, and will spend a third of his or her year in office travelling the world promoting London and indeed the wider UK as a financial centre. We're the only council in the country where businesses have a vote. So if you're in the City of London, I encourage you to get involved. And it's the curbs and gutters and all the things that your local council where you live. But it's also about the competitiveness of the UK as a financial centre. How we get attracting the right amount of skills. How are we making sure that we've got greater diversity of people that are going into roles? There are all sorts of things that we get involved in. So, so much is, yes, it's medieval, but very relevant for today. And so it's great to be part of that. Now, you asked about the Company of Communicators, and this is where the Harry Potter bit slightly. Okay. I can understand where you see this, and the livery movement is something that dates back the best part of 1,000 years. But the communicators were relatively recent, set up about 24 years ago, really bringing people together across communications. And we're not yet a full livery company, where we hope to get there in the next 12, 18 months. One of the reasons I think that's important is the communications profession has been seen as a support act, I think, for a very long time. And actually, the more that I get involved see how it operates in companies, you look at what creates value today. The amount of intangible value that is attributable to so much market cap in companies today is testament to the fact that actually creating that narrative, being able to describe what you do, is absolutely integral to the reputation and strategy of a company. And the communicators, hopefully achieving this status soon, is a sign that our industry has really grown up, that we're no longer the support aid. Actually, we're incredibly central to the strategic development of the companies that we're involved in. And I really want people who work in the profession to be able to see their centrality to that and the hugely impactful role they can play.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head there, because we see it so often. We do a lot of crisis comms work at the PR office, and generally sometimes just with new clients, that they assume they only need comms when something big has happened. But as we know, that's often too late. They need to be thinking about incorporating comms at every stage of the business and really making the most of it as well, because it's so important to a company's growth.
It astonishes me that more companies don't think that they need to have someone who is an expert on reputation on their boards. For me, you should have, companies should have at least one non-executive director who understands the value and power of reputation and how you build it. And I think that will become increasingly important, which is great news, frankly, for our industry. But you talked about companies only realising that they need communications in a crisis. My fellow countryman, Sir Linton Crosby, famous political guru, one of his most famous sayings is, "You can't fatten a pig on market day." And, he's absolutely right, because you have to lay the groundwork of those relationships. You can't come in, and it's very difficult to manage a crisis if you're coming to things cold, if you have no relationships. It's very difficult. We have operations, a company I work for, in 130 countries, and you see that. You're much better able to handle an issue in countries where you've taken the time to build relationships.
So you're a professional in the city, and you're also working on Dive In Festival.
Dive In came about. I used to be a journalist in the insurance sector, and I was the editor of a specialist magazine. And what was really cool about that is I got to know lots of senior people globally across the insurance industry. And one of the people that I think I did the first ever interview with her is the now Dame Inga Beale, who for a time was chief executive of Lloyd's. And Inga and I knew Inga at the start of her sort of senior career, and we've stayed in touch throughout. And when she became chief executive of Lloyd's, she phoned me one day and said, "Jason, I knew this market would be pale, male and stale, but I had no idea of just how bad and backward it is.
Wow.
I'm going to give you some money and some agency support to go out and run a series of events educating people about what diversity and inclusion means. So would you please get together a whole bunch of heads of communications across the industry, come up with a name and promote it, thanks very much, goodbye." And
wow, what an amazing opportunity.
It was fantastic. And in our first year, we did events in London. We had about 8 or 10 events, and just over 1,000 people came. And it was like, wow, gosh, that was really good. And we hadn't even, at that stage, thought about whether we'd do it in a second year. And I think the general consensus was, went well. Of course, the people who came were all people who got it, right? Who understood why diversity mattered, why inclusion, why inclusive workplaces mattered. And what we really needed to do is attract some of the old dinosaurs that worked in the industry, for them to come along and start to see the light. But at the same time, we had people sort of all over the world who'd heard about this, and people in Sydney and Hong Kong and New York saying, "Wow, gosh, if you do it again, can we do some events at the same time?" And so actually, and Inga was sort of pushing me sort of constantly. What about, I heard another country. Oh gosh, we can't. But in year 2, we had events in 7 countries, and we had about I think it was around about 2,500 people sort of came to events. Anyway, this mushroom, more and more people heard about it, and it was really taken to heart. 150 events in 40 countries. We had people from over 95 countries attend, because most of it is virtual or hybrid, and we had 35,000 people come.
Wow.
And it's really powerful, and we cover every aspect of diversity and inclusion. We try and take on things that are in the slightly too hard basket or people might feel uncomfortable about. We've raised some really important issues, and what is really powerful about Dive In is that it starts conversations that people carry on. So 2 years ago, we had our first event, almost 3 years ago now, we had our first event on neurodiversity, talking about actually how, having autism or ADHD or dyslexia actually can be a real advantage to firms. What it did was it started a conversation. And so now you have a whole bunch of firms, mine included. Marsh has set up an apprenticeship for young people with autism to come and work with us. But more and more companies are sort of looking at what they can do to encourage a more neurodiverse workforce. And anecdotally, I heard lots of people felt after that they could come out to their managers as having autism or ADHD. We've just enabled that conversation so people don't feel that they need to keep it to themselves as much anymore. And I think that's incredibly powerful, and that's the beauty about having something which is so public and so well known across the insurance industry is that we're really setting the tone. One of the events that I attended last year, which was so powerful, was on menopause. And I'm a sort of North London, metropolitan sort of kind of a modern bloke, and thought I knew what women knew. I had no idea whatsoever.
And that's the beauty of events like this, because as you just said, there's so many people that had never even thought that maybe they're sitting next to someone in an office day to day who is neurodiverse, and then you're opening up these conversations, you're encouraging people to put their hand up and say, this is me, this is what I bring to the team. Or in situations like menopause, you're raising it to the rest of the team to understand how to manage those situations. That those conversations don't happen unless events like these do.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of talk about bringing your whole self to work. What does that really mean? It means that you don't feel you have to shut something off just because you're in a work environment. You can talk about it more openly, and there's all sorts of studies that have come out that shows people who feel they're more able to talk about some of the things going on in their life are more productive, and that's kind of obvious to me. The theme for this year's Dive In Festival is the power of inclusion, unlocking innovation, and to the point I was making earlier about wanting to attract people who would not normally come to something about diversity and inclusion, is that we're wanting to show that actually it's inclusive workplaces where people can be more themselves, where we're bringing in ideas from a wider range of people, actually that we're coming up with the kind of innovations that we need to solve the big problems going on in the world.
So I think about my personal experience, especially working and living in London, I think I see a lot of companies do understand the importance of diversity in a workplace nowadays. But what's been your experience? Do you think you've seen a big change over time?
I grew up in Sydney, which everyone thinks is a very cosmopolitan and sort of city of the world. It's actually under that surface is a deeply conservative environment, and growing up gay in somewhere like Sydney was not as easy as perhaps the outsider might think that it would be. When I started working in insurance, I had to keep a mental tab on who I would come out to, and that wasn't healthy behaviour. I sort of in my mind would have a list of people of I'm out to them and not out to them, and produced occasionally sort of hilarious results of, you'd be in a meeting and you were out to some and not out to others, and comments would get made and sniggers and things, but you just accept it because that's the way it was. And I realised that once I got to a level of seniority where I didn't care what people thought, that I was much more sort of positive and confident, and talking to others, on the LGBT side, I certainly see that. I'm a relatively confident person. But there are people who are perhaps less confident, and it harms their careers, and it's like we're not getting the best out of them. I moved to London from a warm, hot climate, never living more than 2 minutes away from a beach. Like, why do I come here?
Yeah,
right?
It does sound quite crazy. I'm pretty sure all of our listeners are thinking, I wouldn't swap that.
London is a great international city, right? You get to meet so many interesting people, and I want London to stay like that. I want London to be that great international hub, and to do that, it's a great melting pot. And the more that we unlock that talent, the more chance London has to stay on top. I think London has changed. The culture in the London insurance market has changed enormously, as I think as a result of Dive-In. I remember standing outside Lloyd's of London at the first Dive-In festival. We were handing out stickers and saying, do you want to demonstrate that you're an ally to your LGBT colleagues? And most people pretended that we weren't there and just walked past and ignored us. About a third, I'd say, would take the sticker, oh, thanks very much, and wore it. And about 10-15% of people went, no thanks. And I think you would never get that reaction now, right? It's, one, society has changed, but also I think as we have done the education sector about how this is a good thing, we've seen, almost every company now take this up. We have 27 sponsors, and who have to, they give us a 5-figure sum each year to do this. We've got a record number of sponsors for the festival because they see the value in it. So, we've got buy-in from the C-suite, but at all levels of the organisation. So if you are someone who has views like this, you've got to leave them at the train station. And I think actually most people have changed their opinion of this, from seeing this as something that was just a fluffy issue to actually something where this can help. If I don't get on board with this, my business will suffer.
The comms people out there listening will be very interested to hear how you have helped to drive the festival to be one of the largest diversity events in the world. I think the figures were over 128,000 participants over the past 9 years. You're obviously an expert in comms, but how have you managed to create such a following? The
most important thing, and this is the core of all communications, is that you have really great content, right? You can have the best promotion, really flash, but if the core thing that you're promoting isn't good, then then it won't fly. So it's that really practical aspect that has helped to make sure that the media are interested in us. So we have, I think, almost every significant insurance trade publication in the world is a media partner of ours. Yeah. Across 5 or 6 continents, I think we have media partners. Everyone wants to be a part of this because they can see that it really is making a difference. I think people have enjoyed having their eyes opened, to see that there are issues, and actually you scratch below the surface on some of these, issues of social mobility. There are a lot of successful people in insurance in the wider city who've come from humble origins, and once upon a time you would have tried to hide that. You would have changed your accent and you would have dressed well. And now actually it's something that, we want people to talk about more. How do we get more people from less privileged socioeconomic backgrounds, people who didn't go to private schools, coming and working in the sector? We've got, in London, we have, 40% of people come from non-white backgrounds. How do we get more of them? Because we certainly don't have 40% working in the London insurance market. I'd like to think that Dive-In has played a material part in helping change that culture. There's still a lot of work to be done. There's still a lot of education, still a long way to go. We're not near, our gender pay gaps in the insurance sector are much higher than in the rest of the UK, and that is still something we need to address. Likewise, ethnicity pay gaps as well. Where, progress is being made, perhaps not as fast as it should be, but it is being made, and, Dive-In will be there trying to, help give practical ways that we can help accelerate that. Yeah. So anyone who's thinking of getting involved, website is there, look it up. Very happy for you to find me on LinkedIn and say, hey, heard this, would like to be interested in joining. Very happy to have a conversation.
Jason, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great, thank you very much.
That's it for today's episode. Thank you to everyone who listened. Thank you to Jason for taking part. And if you'd like to hear more about Diving Festival, then obviously do reach out to Jason. And if you'd like to hear more about what we do at the PR office across public relations and public affairs, then please do get in touch with us. We would love to chat.